Okay, I'd like to start off by acknowledging that this virtual presentation is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. In particular, I'm speaking to you from Patwin ancestral lands here in Davis. We acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. We encourage you to learn about which tribal nations are indigenous to the area where you are now living. One excellent source of information is Native Land, and we've dropped the link into the chat to explore later. Alrighty, so we have the fortune of hosting 4 California Naturalist Program instructors today to speak in honor of California Biodiversity Day. Susie Fortner with Friends of the Dunes in Arcata, Hillary Holt with Catalina Island Conservancy on Catalina Island, Ali Stefanchich with Sierra Streams Institute in Nevada City, and Dr. Lacey Gerhart-Barley with UC Davis in Davis. All right, so first up is Susie Fortner. Susie completed a BS in marine biology at UC Santa Cruz. After working as an environmental educator, Susie pursued an MA in social science through the Environment and Community program at Humboldt State, focusing on place-based nature education and equal access to positive experiences in nature. Susie has been working with Friends of the Dunes since 2007, currently as Programs and Operations Director, overseeing all of Friends of the Dunes education and stewardship programs and managing a nature center. Susie remains dedicated to connecting people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities to Humboldt's diverse coastal environments. So with that, I will pass the reins over to Susie.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Yes, my name's Susie. I'm the Programs and Operations Director with Friends of the Dunes. Let me see if I can get to the next slide here. There we go. So Friends of the Dunes, located in Humboldt County, California, is dedicated to conserving the natural diversity of coastal environments through community-supported education and stewardship programs. Okay, I'd like to start by acknowledging that the coastal environments that Friends of the Dunes is working to conserve are located in the unceded territory of the Wiyot people, which includes the Wiyot tribe, Bear River Rancheria, and Blue Lake Rancheria. Wiyot people continue to be the original stewards of the diverse ecosystems surrounding Wigi, the Humboldt Bay. And as they have been since time immemorial, including the Wadalf, the coastal dunes, located between Wigi and Sho'or, the Pacific Ocean. One of the ways in which we can honor our placement within Wiyot territory is by acknowledging the original names of these places, plants, and animals in Saluttaluk, the Wiyot language. These are names that existed long before the violent colonization of this area and attempted erasure of indigenous knowledge and cultures. So I'm coming to you from Jarojiji, Eureka, where my home is, and here in Humboldt County, located at the far northern coast of California, we have a beautiful 32-mile stretch of coastal dunes, which starts at about the mouth of the Mad River, Badawat, and stretches down south, just south of Wiyot, the Eel River. So Friends of the Dunes also owns and manages this amazing and unique facility, the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center, which is located in the community of Manila, which is actually just west and south of Arcata a little bit. And we are in a prime location in between a bunch of different properties managed for conservation and coastal access. We work really closely with these partners in order to provide education and stewardships at various properties around the Humboldt Bay. There's actually one additional property not shown on this map because it was previously private property, but Friends of the Dunes is also currently the interim land manager of a 352-acre, very amazing dune property called the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area, located just south of the Manila Dunes Recreation Area and stretching from the ocean all the way over to the bay. We are the interim land managers, so we're working on handing that land over. The dunes portion on the ocean side is going to the BLM, and on the bay side, we are working on giving that land to the Wiyot tribe. We also own our own land, a land trust up here at the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center that's 122 acres. But I have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So our community science project that we focus on for our CalNat course is the Humboldt Coastal Biodiversity Project, which was started by Humboldt Baykeepers several years ago to record biodiversity within our coastal environments in Humboldt Bay. We have a sub-project within that collection project that is focused on Humboldt coastal dunes. So I am going to do a whirlwind tour of our coastal dune ecosystems, as you can see from my slide here, which was taken at that Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area that I just mentioned. Dunes are not just sand. We have various habitats stretching from the forest on the left side of the screen here to open moving sand sheets, to seasonal wetlands, to dynamic ever-changing foredune habitats. I'm going to do a real quick tour of those and hopefully keep it to 10 minutes. All right, so our dune forests, very special and unique habitats here on the North Coast. Our dune forests are primarily dominated by Sitka spruce and shore pine, Pinus contorta contorta. However, we do get other species of trees mixed in there, like this very impressive Douglas fir you see in this photo that our CNPS walk is appreciating there. You can actually see some polypody ferns hanging off of it, as well as a bunch of mosses growing on it. Very beautiful, amazing dune forest habitats. A lot more moisture, a lot more protection from the wind than some of our other dune ecosystems. So what we might find in here is the Sitka spruce. As I mentioned, there's some new cones for the Sitka spruce. And sorry, my clicking is not working. Okay, elegant rain orchid is another species because of the moisture and the cover and the extra nutrients found in the dune forest. We get different flower species that require that, such as 6 different species of orchids. Of course, we also get some mushrooms, like I apologize, I'm having a little bit of a, okay. The Amanita muscaria, fly aggregate. I always have a hard time with that one. Fly aggregate mushroom. And there's one more. The screen control is not working great, Sarah. Sorry about that. There it is. Okay, so we also get a bunch of lichens and mosses that enjoy this very moist habitat of the dune forest. I'm not sure of those species, but we did do a great lichen webinar, which is posted to our website, which would probably tell you. Okay. I apologize. I am having some slide transition issues. Okay, here we go. Moving sand sheets. This is a really dynamic system. Here's a giant moving sand sheet, and you can see the slip face over there to the right kind of falling down into the forest. Definitely a difficult environment to survive in, but we do get species out there that thrive in this sort of ever-changing habitat. One of these is the yellow sand verbena. You can see it growing there just amongst the moving sand. It really thrives in that constant disturbance of our sand sheets. This is the beach leia, which is currently an endangered plant, but it's doing so well here on the North Coast that our botany friends over at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are actually currently working to delist that species. And it's also a great place to see animal tracks. We always don't see the animals in real life out there, but we can see their tracks out in that open sand. Here, there's some little insect tracks in the foreground, probably a beetle. In the middle is some cute little deer mice tracks. And in the background for scale is my dog's tracks. Actually, she's a 35-pound Kelpie mix. But great place to see some cool animal tracks. All right, so we also have these dune swales, which are really low points out in the dunes where fresh water collects when we, fingers crossed, get a good amount of rain, which we haven't in the past couple of years. But when we do get rain, the water table rises, and then there are parts of the dunes in these low points which are completely underwater, really important freshwater seasonal wetlands. So we get water-loving species out there, such as willows. This is the Hooker's willow, and you can see it growing there right in that pond. And of course, some amphibians that highly depend on these freshwater habitats for survival. So this is the rough-skinned newt, or also known as the orange-bellied newt, extremely poisonous animal. And our Pacific chorus frogs are pretty common out there in our dune swales as well. All right, and moving towards the ocean, we have our 4-dune habitat, which is the dunes, the newest dunes, which are closest to the ocean, with a huge array of native plant species, many, many different beautiful plants from early spring into the fall. We just have a beautiful array of different coastal flowers growing out there. And so some of my favorites, that fluffy pink one is beach buckwheat or seaside buckwheat, a little bumblebee hanging out on that. And the Humboldt Bay wallflower is an endangered and endemic plant to the Humboldt Bay region. The recent Jepson actually grouped it back with other species of the Menzies wallflower, but our botanists up here are pretty certain that it is a distinct subspecies of that and only grows in the dunes around the Humboldt Bay. This is the seaside daisy with a little native bee hanging out on there. I'm not a bee specialist. I think it might be a silver bee, but I could be wrong. And then Ackman blue butterfly, another one of our really important pollinators and very, very common out there in our coastal dune habitats. So as you can see from my quick tour, there is a lot of biodiversity stretching from the bay, from the Humboldt Bay out to the ocean in this dynamic and diverse area. Of course, we have some threats to biodiversity. Our major threats up here include 3 species of invasive plants. The grass you're looking at is European beach grass, Ammophila arenaria. There is the yellow bush lupin mixed in, which is actually native to other parts of California, but is not native to Northern California. It never made it past San Francisco on its own, but was actually brought up here by the lighthouse keeper's wife on the peninsula and planted in her yard, and then seeds were spread around from there. Both these species were spread around, the Ammophila was spread around lumber mills, and the yellow bush lupin was spread around railroad tracks during the prime logging days to help stabilize the sand. Ammophila, also that root word means sand loving. It does stabilize the sand and it crowds out our native plants. And the yellow bush lupin is a nitrogen fixer and it changes the habitat type, introduces nutrients to the soil that wouldn't otherwise be there, and creates a microhabitat with the shade that it produces. We also have ice plant is another big problem up here on the Humboldt coast that's the Humboldt Bay wallflower there, amazingly growing in midst of all that ice plant. Also takes over a large portion of the dunes. Okay, so really quickly, I might be running out of time, so I'm gonna wrap it up real fast. So here's our classic before and after photo. All these restoration efforts have started out at the Lamphir Dunes over 40 years ago, and you can see the CCCs out there before removing the beach grass. Same spot about 9 years later, and you can see the huge difference in biodiversity. So Friends of the Dunes works with community volunteers to restore these native dune habitats. We have 2 work days a month, and we are highly dependent on our volunteers and their hand removal of these invasive plants. But when we do have the funding available, we also invite the California Conservation Corps to come out there and help remove these invasive plants. And Friends of the Dunes is very dedicated to conserving this biodiversity, but we obviously could not do it without our community partners, without our volunteers, and without our members. So it's very much a community-led effort. All right, thank you. And sorry if I went over, Sarah.
That was great, thank you. All right, so next we have Hillary Holt. Hillary joined the Catalina Island Conservancy Education Department in 2016, having completed her master's in zoology with a certificate in ecology, evolution, and conservation biology from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She is enraptured by evolution and biodiversity on islands. As the lead of the Conservancy's naturalist training program and outreach programming, she is dedicated to bringing stewards of Catalina Island the most current information from the most relevant sources. With that, welcome Hillary.
Hillary, I think you're muted still.
Well, there went a whole 30 seconds of my 10 minutes. So I was just thinking
that.
no, my fault. So I was just saying thank you for having me on, and that I am going to be talking today about a relatively new venture that we have started as a part of our California Naturalist program. And so looking at building larger and larger networks and harnessing the power of the naturalists that we do have coming into our California Naturalist program in the MPA Watch in Avalon on Catalina Island. And so this next slide has some formatting issues, I know, when it pops up. And you should be able to see the MPA Watch logo here, because I'm waiting for the slide to advance. I'm just going to keep hitting these buttons until it advances. There we go. And so you can see this little squiggle is meant to be the MPA Watch, but which is very important for me to highlight. But I want to start with the acknowledgements in this conversation, because so much of what I'm going to be relaying to you is just the training and the information that I have been lucky enough to receive working a part of these networks with these partners of like-minded individuals that their objective is to preserve biodiversity. And so, and this fish over here is Heal the Bay. It must have white text behind it as well. And so not only am I a part of the Catalina Island Conservancy and a California naturalist instructor, but I am also I'm the co-chair of the Catalina Island Marine Protected Area Collaborative. And that works inside the larger statewide MPA Collaborative network. And of course, I'll be talking about MPA Watch, that is run by Heal the Bay locally in Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles MPA Collaborative plays a big part in that. So the whole idea of creating this larger network really does start with these partners. And so how does the network start and begin? And so giving you this background as I try to move my slide forward again, of the interconnected network of statewide MPAs. So Sarah, if you can advance my slide. And so the objective of the Marine Life Protection Act that was passed in 1999 was to turn what was disparate, about 60 disjointed protected areas and closures, into an interconnected statewide network. And so by 2012, there were 124 of these marine protected areas along the coast. And by making sure that they are this interconnected series of protected areas, the monitoring and management is able to be done at a higher level and able to be pushed forward through these other networks that I'll be sharing with you. So the goals of the Marine Life Protection Act, are doing exactly what we're here to talk about today, which is to protect and to sustain natural biodiversity, and really to be able to not just protect things on a species by species level, but to really look holistically at these ecosystems and protect them in their entirety. And so that was done during the stakeholder regional stakeholder scientific through the scientific stakeholder driven process that actually informed where these MPAs were going to be placed. And they are all these, the Marine Life Protection Act is also trying to give more opportunities for recreational, educational, and study opportunities with minimal human use. And of course, to ensure that these MPAs are managed as a network. And so then the Marine Life Protection Program was set up with 4 pillars to achieve the goal of the Marine Life Protection Act. And so those 4 goals, just a little drag here. The 4 pillars, the 4 of these, of the management program that it was built on were outreach, education, research and monitoring, enforcement, compliance, and policy and permitting. And you can see where you can learn more about these things as well. And so now that these things have been theoretically laid down on paper, how were they supposed to be then enforced? How are they supposed to get people to comply with those? The term that's thrown around a lot is they didn't want them to turn into paper parks where, yes, they've written these things down and, fingers crossed. You have to actually get the tools to let people know where these boundaries are, to let them know what the regulations are within these different marine protected areas, which a few slides back, you could see that there are many designations that I really want to encourage you to learn about through possibly your local MPA Collaborative. And so it started in Orange County that the now director of the MPA Collaborative Network, Calla Allison, had that question: how are we going to enforce these new marine protected areas? And it became clear that it needed to happen within the local community, that this is that it needed to be a grassroots effort with community members and businesses that are invested in those local MPAs, that know what the needs of that community are. And so this is the birth of the Orange County MPA Collaborative that is now a statewide collaborative network. So there are now 14 collaboratives, and you can see that they are designated by their county boundaries. And Catalina is the only one, or actually LA County is the only county to have 2 collaboratives. Catalina felt as though our community and our needs were unique enough that we were to have our own collaborative. So these collaboratives really work a lot in education and outreach and getting the brochures and the signs and the information out to people so that these marine protected areas. So the screen stopped sharing, Sarah. So that these marine protected areas are being complied with. And so, Sarah, do you see that the screen stopped sharing?
Yeah, sorry about that. My computer is getting overloaded here.
Okay, no worries.
One sec.
So I will just keep sharing, if you can imagine the image, that the effort though was that these collaboratives are built on the 4 pillars of the management program, and that not only can there be this outreach and education, but there can be this network of monitoring that goes on. And so a lot of this monitoring is community science-based participatory science through organizations such as Reef Check and MPA Watch. Reef Check is training volunteer divers to be monitoring the ecosystems and the habitat. And then MPA Watch is looking at the human use inside and outside of these marine protected areas. And so I mentioned that Heal the Bay manages MPA Watch within LA County, but I really want to encourage you to look into getting involved with MPA Watch locally near you, continuing to build our network. And so the goal here is that this information aligned with the other monitoring of the habitat health that is going on, it can be used to analyze and identify trends, inform enforcement and management, and the science of MPAs. And so this information is reported and is a part of the ongoing decadal review process that is currently in progress. And just in case you want to get involved, this is one of the tip lines that people that are involved in MPA Watch can call to DFW. All right, so now this is where we have the network of naturalists that come in. So, and the network of these MPAs. And so as most of you know, we're getting the participants in the courses that we teach so excited about being able to continue on in their community with a direct capability to inform scientific activities that are going on. And so our actual community science project for our class is through iNaturalist. It's the CityNature Challenge. And so the MPA Watch is a relatively new thing that we are offering as an optional participatory science activity, because the naturalists that come to get involved with Catalina, of course, are very excited about the coastal Mediterranean climate and ecosystems here along the coast, but they are getting involved on the island because they want to be involved with the ocean and the ocean ecosystem as well, and that interface between the watersheds and these marine areas that are going on. And the other beautiful thing about MPA Watch is that it is a rigorous scientific protocol that they have to follow, and so it is giving them more of this training as well. And so working with Heal the Bay, we are, again, sorry about the formatting. So again, Heal the Bay and my fellow partner, the other co-chair of the Catalina MPA Collaborative out at USC on the west end of the island, and the LA MPA Collaborative have worked to get MPA Watch on other MPAs across the island. But here in Avalon, we have Casino Point and Lovers Cove that people can literally just get off the boat or walk right out of their house and be able to monitor, because these are really highly used marine protected areas. And so these naturalists are able to feel very connected to this ongoing research that is being put into place. And so I briefly mentioned the decadal review process. And so this is adaptive management. These MPAs were put into place 10 years ago. So now it's time to check up on them. How have they been doing? And that is all informed by this long-term monitoring that is going on. And so you can see kind of this graphic from the master plan for marine protected areas that's showing how that long-term monitoring goes into that review process. And so to just share with you that we are seeing the effectiveness of these marine protected areas already. And so a review of these 124 marine reserves, we're seeing that not only are fish bigger, but fish are more dense. And this holistic management of these areas is also making these areas more resilient, and people get to be a part of. That's always one of the most joyful things of certifying people as California naturalists, is because it does put them into this larger network of naturalists. And so then to give them these other doors that they can go through to continue to be stewards of these places that they love, and feet on the ground be working on contributing data to these projects. So continue to look forward to working with those partners and honing the training process throughout this, and spreading the word. So thank you all so much. And again, thank you to my partners.
Thank you so much, Hillary. All right. We're moving on next to Ali Stefancic. She is the regional and she is the Outreach and Education Coordinator at Sierra Streams Institute in Nevada City, the land of the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan. Ali has recently rejoined Sierra Streams after having been an AmeriCorps member with them in 2012 to 2013. She and Sierra Streams Institute feel deeply about the importance of communities guiding scientific inquiry and local land and waterway management for the betterment of human and environmental health. In addition to spending as much time as she can at her local waterways, she also loves independent cinema, books, and making funny art calendars of her cat Livy. So with that, welcome Ali to the stage.
Thanks, Sarah. I hope that I have no problems. My computer has been telling me that my internet is unstable, but hopefully it holds up. And I'll just wait. It doesn't seem like I have controls yet. Okay, so as Sarah said, I work with Sierra Streams Institute, and we're located in Nevada City, California, which is in the Sierra Nevada foothills. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour of the foothills and then talk a little bit about some of the projects that we at Sierra Streams do, both as an organization and with our California Naturalist members. Can't seem, oh, I got it. Oh no, I went too far. Okay, and before I get started, I just want to acknowledge that the Nisenan people are still among us today, though nearly invisible. And we understand that we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the near genocide of their people. As a resident or visitor in Nisenan land, we support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in efforts to stabilize their people, as well as their campaign to restore federal recognition. And I just like to start with this. The Nisenan were the original stewards of our land, and you know, getting them the recognition that they need has been a relatively recent fight. And so if you do come to Nevada City, I highly suggest they just opened a gallery in downtown Nevada City. So I definitely suggest that you stop by there. So the Sierra Nevada foothills, our organization, Sierra Streams Institute, started monitoring as a Friends of Deer Creek is our original name. And so Deer Creek kind of spans the foothills. It starts up at about 4,000 feet, and it goes down to about 200 feet in elevation. So we kind of span the whole foothills span of ecosystem. So these are all different pictures of Deer Creek at different elevations. So the Sierra Nevada foothills are characterized by hot, dry summers and cool, wet winters. And let's see. So these are some other pictures from around the area. So our dominant species, lower in elevation, we have a lot of blue oaks and live oaks, and higher in elevation, our dominant oak species is black oaks, which were used a lot by our local Nisenan tribe as a food source. They have big acorns that are apparently prized for their deliciousness. At lower elevations, gray pine is the dominant pine species. More up in Nevada City, we have a lot of ponderosa and Jeffrey pine, as well as incense cedar, madrone, manzanita. And then we do have some problems with invasive plants that are taking over a lot of our understories and changing the ecology of the area. So we have a lot of problems with Himalayan blackberry, which can be problematic because it prevents wildlife from moving in normal patterns. Scotch broom, definitely is a problem because it is such a intense fuel. And then lower elevations in kind of the oak woodland areas, it has yellow star thistle is a big problem with taking over big fields, as well as introduced grass species that, while they may be desirable, are not super desirable for the ecology of the area because they create continuous fuel beds. So these are some of my favorite wildlife species of my local ecosystem. We have the yellow-legged frog, which is a listed species. Deer Creek does have a small salmon run in the mouth of it. The Sierra Nevada red fox. Then below that is the ringtail, the fingers crossed one day I'll hopefully see. And then also the California black rail, which is a really interesting bird, super common in the Coast Range and spread to our area. It's thought because of our irrigation systems leaking in such a way that it made it possible for them to have the wetlands that they love to live in. And they're known as the most elusive bird because they crawl around on their they have little hooks on the tips of their wings and they crawl around in wetlands. So I just think they're a super interesting species to highlight in our area. And of course, our local ecological threats are similar to those around California. We do have a strong history of gold mining in our area, which continues to impact our ecosystems, both with inputs of mercury and other heavy metals, as well as just the devastation that happened to our land. We are being impacted by climate change with changes in fire regime and changes in water and rain happening. On the right, there's the burn severity scar of the Jones Fire, which is a local fire that happened in our burned down our office. And so huge changes in fire regimes, as well as constant pressures from development are kind of introducing new things into our understanding of the biodiversity of the area. So Sierra Streams Institute, as I said, has been around for about 20 years. We started as Friends of Deer Creek. So we started with monitoring our local Deer Creek. So our monitoring program is still a huge part of what we do. We also do a lot of restoration and try to position that restoration in key areas to provide habitat. We do a lot of research on forest health and how to best manage our lands, as well as the lasting impact of gold mining in our area. That map is the breast cancer rate incidence in California. And so kind of the gold belt of where gold mining used to happen has some of the highest breast cancer rates in the country. And so we do a lot of research about ways to decrease exposure to mining toxins. We have a pretty robust science education program and also an awesome lab to test all our monitoring samples. And so our watershed monitoring program, this is a program we get a lot of our naturalists involved in. And so we have 17 sites throughout the watershed, and we've been monitoring them consistently every month for over 20 years. And so we have them strategically positioned to be above and below certain changes that might be happening in the watershed. So we have a lot above or below certain town sites, reservoirs, and different confluences, wastewater treatment plants, just to make sure that we can quickly respond to any changes that might be happening, and be able to figure out where those changes are originating. So if we have a huge change in bacteria levels or changes in pH, temperature, we want to be able to identify where that change is coming from. And, you know, specifically with the example of Lake Wildwood, there was huge E. coli levels increasing there. And so we were able to identify that the geese were actually introducing a problematic strain of E. coli at the lake. And they've instituted a program to help reduce geese at the lake. And now the bacteria levels are safer, which is great for all the animals around. So these are just some pictures of our volunteers monitoring at some of our different sites. We do monthly water quality monitoring, and then twice a year, we also collect benthic macroinvertebrate and algae samples. So we do have a great guide to common aquatic benthic macroinvertebrates in California. And we use those samples both to understand the health of the ecosystem on kind of a bigger picture, and also to understand the diversity of creatures that are living in our local waterways. And then we also do a lot of restoration. There's been a big shift in our mindsets of restoration, both as an organization and I think, just dealing with how people envision restoration on a whole. You can always go back and pull more and more blackberry, but until you really help the native plants to take hold and flourish, you'll be pulling blackberry until forever. So I think, we've really shifted in looking at ecosystem resilience, how can we make our lands more resilient to the various changes that are happening, and how can we really help the native plants that animals depend on to flourish. And so that's it. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about CR streams or interested in our bug book.
Thank you, Allie, for that presentation. Finally, our final speaker, Dr. Lacey Gerhart-Barley, is an assistant professor of teaching in evolution and ecology at UC Davis. Her research focuses on instructional technology, both within the classroom and beyond. She has been a California Naturalist instructor since 2018, teaching the Wild Davis certification course to UC Davis undergraduates. She also partners with the UC Davis Center for Community and Citizen Science to integrate participatory science projects into environmental education at UC Davis and beyond, including in non-traditional education environments such as the Inside Garden Environmental Education Program for incarcerated Californians. She is also a co-organizer for the Sacramento Region CityNature Challenge Global Bioblitz through iNaturalist. So we'll have Lacey up to bring us home.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Sarah. While you're getting my slides up, I'll also talk about our land acknowledgement at UC Davis. Both the town of Davis and the campus are on the Quechildehe and Quetzaldehe and Yochadehe Wintu nations, which are members of the Patwin people. And as members of a land-grant university, we have a particularly complex relationship with this history because we received land both for the UC Davis campus and for some of our reserve lands directly from illegal cessions of land through things like the Morrill Act and other federal acts. And so my students and I are a little more complicit in this history than we often realize, and often are completely unaware of the relationship that our campus and our reserve lands have with these sort of acts. So the slide that we have here now shows the various participatory science projects that my students participate in. My class is focused on urban ecology of the Davis campus and the town of Davis. And every week we focus on a different public participatory science project. So my students have contributed data to all of these. I have a link there that I can provide also in the chat that outlines a paper that Greg and Sarah and I wrote last spring about the process of transitioning the class into a remote online instructional environment. So I had taught the class once fully in person and now twice fully remotely with students scattered throughout the United States. And so I'll talk a little bit about how that played out with our participatory science projects. And then you can see more about that transition process in the link that I just put in the chat. Our primary participatory science project is the CityNature Challenge, which I heard someone else mention before. I can't remember if it was Hillary, I think, that mentioned in being involved in the CityNature Challenge. This is an iNaturalist focused participatory science event that's run by the California Academy of Sciences and the LA County Natural History Museum. And the idea is that it's a 4-day Bioblitz where different cities throughout the world friendly compete for who can post the most wildlife observations to iNaturalist. The Sacramento region is a participant, which includes Davis. We're down here in Yolo County, so we're on the edge of the Sacramento region. Both Sarah Angulo and I are organizers for the Sacramento region, and so it was kind of an obvious link between our interest in the class to have my students participate in this. How we actually do this in the class requires a little bit of structure. Since the Wild Davis course is a non-majors lower division elective, a lot of students don't have much of a background in biology. And I think in the 3 years I've offered the class, only 2 students even had an iNaturalist account prior to joining the class. And so the first thing we do is a practice Bioblitz on campus in class together so they can practice using the app and kind of seeing how it operates to get an idea of urban nature settings. So this is a map of where our observations were from one of the Bioblitzes we did in class together. I told them they could not go to the Arboretum. So down here is the UC Davis Arboretum. And that's an obvious, urban green space that students will go to find nature. And so I intentionally try to get them to think about how do you see nature, in and around buildings and in and around landscaping and parking lots, right? There's an idea that there isn't nature in urban settings, that there isn't nature on campus. And so I'm trying to explicitly get them to get beyond that idea. The students then summarize some of our results. So this is the results from our first class Bioblitz. There were 34 observers, so that's 32 students in the class plus me and the TA. And it was about an hour and a half. We made almost 300 observations of 75 different species. And even just in that time, we had over 100 people helping us identify those species. And so this quickly illustrated to the students that there's a really robust community on iNaturalist of other users who will help you identify your work and who will participate in your observations. The x-axis is hard to read here, but our most common observation in our campus Bioblitz was a fox squirrel, which is not surprising. Others included the western honeybee, some lady beetles, California scrub jays, mallards, etc. The sort of things you would expect to see on a college campus. But that did illustrate to them, well, these are the most common. We did find 75 different species, and so there was a lot more variety on campus than they maybe were initially anticipating. Then the students participate in the CityNature Challenge on their own, in their own particular space. So when we operated in person, this was still primarily in the town of Davis, but when the class operated remotely, students could participate from wherever they were physically located, which wasn't even necessarily in California. There's a number of ways that iNaturalist allows students to engage with both nature and other naturalists and data that I find really useful for a teaching context. So the first is that community of other users who will comment on your observations or help you identify things. My favorite example of this is a student, Ayana, who took this photo that she believed to be of a snapping turtle in the Arboretum waterway. And there was I've shown only part of it, there was a very long conversation on iNaturalist about whether this was or was not a snapping turtle. I'll put a link to her observation in the chat here so you can see it. There were some debates about whether snapping turtles are even in this part of California. And I was aware of a research project on the Arboretum waterway that illustrated the diversity of turtles in the waterway. So there was a whole conversation about what this might be. And Ayana got really excited about having found something that was so interesting to a bunch of people on iNaturalist. And this small debate she kind of inspired around what exact organism we had found. We did end up landing on it being a snapping turtle. So she was very pleased that her initial ID was correct, even though she wasn't necessarily super confident in her IDing skills at the time. Another way that iNaturalist allows students to engage is with each other. Of all the participatory science projects that I use in the class, iNaturalist is hands down the most robust in terms of letting students see what the other students in the class are working on and what sorts of observations they are making. This was especially important when we operated the class remotely because the students didn't know each other very well and could use iNaturalist as a way to kind of see what other wildlife their colleagues were finding. I put a link in the chat to our iNaturalist project. And so you can see This includes all cohorts of the Wild Davis class. And so they can even kind of see other students on campus who've been through the class, who are still active on iNaturalist, and see what sorts of observations they're making there. And so that was a way to kind of support some community building, even when we were physically very far apart and interacting only remotely. Another way that, and because the iNaturalist operates very similarly to social media, the students are really comfortable with how to interact with it and making a profile and sharing things with each other and commenting on each other's things, because it operates in a way that they're already very comfortable with and very familiar with. And so they engage with it pretty readily, which I found is really useful for the class. It also allows students to engage with data on the observations. So iNaturalist, I would say, is also the most robust of the participatory science projects I use in terms of allowing you to access data and download things and make searches and kind of access the full robustness of the data that's recorded on there. These are an example of two data projects students did in my class. The first was focused on the Arboretum waterway here, which is outlined here. And this student did both a seasonal analysis of what birds were found throughout the Arboretum in various seasons. The mallard is especially common in spring, not surprising, that's when they're having a lot of their babies. And so you're getting a lot of observations of those. But then other birds were a little bit more common in different seasons. And then the student also did an assessment of where in the Arboretum they were found. And she had a particularly interesting outcome that the cormorants were found in one section of the Arboretum in one season, and then were found only in the middle and southwest sections later in the year. And so we had some interesting class conversations about, is that maybe because the birds are moving throughout the waterway, or is that something about where the people are active in the Arboretum making the observations, right? Like, is this thinking about how the data are generated and where the source of difference might be, and if we could actually apply that to the birds' behavior or to the behavior of the observers. This project on the right is an analysis of part of San Francisco in the 2019 CityNature Challenge, which was a normal in-person event, and then the 2020 CityNature Challenge, which of course was heavily impacted by shelter-in-place guidelines, restrictions on being in public spaces, even public green spaces. And so this student looked at where in this neighborhood people were making observations during the CityNature Challenge. This one on top, the red dots are where the observations are, and then the 2021, the blue dots. And so you can see there are some shifts where there was a large concentration of observations in this area, which is a park, in 2019. And then in 2020, we see an interesting shift to a lot of observations along this roadway here and some more along the coast. And so this related to how the observers' physical locations were varying between these different years in response to the COVID pandemic, and how that drove observation locations in response. And the last way I really love about how participating in the CityNature Challenge inspires students is through their long-term engagement with iNaturalist. This is a graph for each year. So 2019 here in the top right, 2020 in the top left, and then 2021 in the bottom right. How each of the different cohorts of the class interacted with iNaturalist in the 6 weeks following the CityNature Challenge. So in the 6 weeks after their required class participation with iNaturalist ends, are they still active in the program? And they are. So you can see in 2019, the 2019 cohort was still very active here. And then in 2020, both the 2019 and 2020 cohorts were still active here. So even students who had taken the class over a year prior were still participating in iNaturalist over a year later. And then the 2021 cohort was still in here too, with a smattering of the earlier cohorts still present as well. You can see the numbers are quite a bit lower, right? Both of these 2020 and 2021 years are still impacted by COVID restrictions and remote issues. My favorite of this is this purplish blue column, which you'll see here is called super user. I unintentionally created an iNaturalist just powerhouse, and her name is Lauren Glavanik, and she had never used iNaturalist prior to the class, absolutely fell in love with it, and is single-handedly a more robust contributor to iNaturalist than any other whole cohort of students from the class, to the point that she even had one of her observations selected as the iNaturalist observation of the day, and has used this as a way to document all of her travels and all of the cool things that she's seen, and has really gotten excited about it. So it's fun to see that, as a cohort, the students are still engaging with it. And at least every now and then we're getting a couple of people or a person here and there who really strongly engage and who make it a part of their daily activity. And so those are all the exciting ways that I think students are using iNaturalist and the CityNature Challenge to engage with data.
Thank you, Lacey, and thank you to all of our speakers today, dealing with our technical issues, and of course our audience as well. I think we are going to wrap it up here with some announcements. So thank you all for participating today.